We are joined in the studio by Mr. Lazarus Jacobs, who is the chairperson of the Namibian Broadcasting Corporation. Mr. Jacobs had an interview, let us call it a fireside chat, with the late president. And he's going to tell us some of the key moments of that interview or during that interview. Mr. Jacobs, welcome to the set.
Thank you so much, Ms. Opoles.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
You had this interesting interview with the president. In fact, how long was it?
So the interview itself was about an hour.
I hear it was one of the longest that he'd ever given.
It was one of the, if not the longest, speaking about his personal life. And you know what happened is when the late president turned 80, the DG, Mr. Similo, came to me and said, man, we really need to do something special with the president. He's turning 80, and 80 is a milestone. And we want to do and I suggested, let's do an interview. So let's do an interview. Let's get somebody to do a nice exclusive interview with the president. And it has to be somebody who can have those insights. And one of the suggestions he made was, let's also find somebody who's a political person, who knew him, who can get to those details that we don't really get to get, and so on. And I said, no, that's a good idea. So we went through a lot of names of people we were thinking about and so on. And a lot of the comrades were reluctant. Some of them said, no, they might not do a good job and so on. And then the DG said, why don't you do it? Why don't I do it? And I said, no, I mean, it's too close because we have this relationship. He's been like an uncle or even a father to me. And he said, but that's exactly the reason. And you have a journalist background. You have done interviews before. Why don't you do it? And as I was reluctant, and he insisted. He said, I think you really, really need to do it. And
so that's how it came about.
That's how it came about. And then we contacted his office, and then I said, I needed to see Your Excellency. He said, no, come over. I went over and I told him, and he laughed when I said, we want to do this interview. And he said, no, let me think about it. And then that afternoon, he called and he said, okay, set it up. And that's how easy it was.
So what did that tell you about the man?
So it told me a couple of things. One, he didn't have these airs and graces about him. And if he believed in something, he went for it. And the thing is with the late president, he was somebody who you never knew who you got when you met him. And I mean it in a positive way. So if you are watching soccer with him, you were both soccer supporters. If you were watching a movie, which was very rare, then he's somebody who's just enjoying a movie. But there was times that he's a president, and then he's a teacher, and he's a leader. At that moment, he was somebody who believed in media. He says, we need to tell our stories. He was very, very passionate about telling the Namibian story. So he just happened to put himself at the center of the story. So when you watch the interview, you'll see that he's telling the story of Namibia and Namibia's liberation struggle through his eyes.
What is the most memorable moment for you from that interview? So
I was pleasantly surprised by how open he was. That was one thing. The second thing, I said to him, Your Excellency, can I send you a few questions? He said, I've been interviewed for the past 80 years. What can you send me that's going to surprise me? I said, nothing is off limits. There's nothing is off limits. You can ask me anything. To me, it was a very, very, very rare privilege.
In fact, it was a hallmark of his professed policy of transparency.
You know, and Mr. Poles, what happened is I asked him, why do you believe so much in press freedom? Why do you believe? And I realized that the one amazing thing about him, whatever decisions he made, whoever he was always informed by his background and his upbringing. He told me this. He said, Lazarus, when I grew up, we had this thing that children should be seen and not be heard. And he never liked it. He said, you can learn something from anybody. And he always said, wherever you go, and that's why he was always surrounded by people who are relatively younger than him. And he never interrupted you when you were speaking. He was an aggressive listener. When you are talking, and when he's talking and you say something, he'll stop. And he always believed that people must be heard. People must express themselves.
Mr. Lazarus Jacobs, thank you very much for that insight. That was the chairperson of the NBC, Mr. Lazarus Jacobs.